Hi, welcome back to my legal segment. I do not have a name, so we call it the legal segment. Yes, where I share my legal nuggets with all of you. So today, as the question is, you want to buy an off-plan property? Do you? So I want us to talk about buying off-plan properties. So an off-plan property. This is your property. I am not your property.
This is your property. Is not my property. This is your property. Is not my property. I tell you what I know. I tell you what I know. Yeah, this is.
Anyway, let's move on. So, you want to buy an off-plan property? I might say property again, but it is what it is, So we move on. So, buying an off-plan, it means essentially that there's no property or unit or apartment. It is supposed to be built in future. So it's futuristic. It's a futuristic kind of deal. So ideally what happens in most scenarios with off-plan, these people come, they're called the developers, the people constructing or the people coordinating the construction and everything, they're called developers. So a developer will come in, they will probably maybe own the property or have bought the property, then they will get an investor. So this investor, or they could be the ones also financing the project. So what they do, they come into a property and they identify or they plan to build a house or they plan to build apartments or whatever. So what they do, they get people to buy into that and they use that money most of the time to build those apartments or those units. Most of the time they'll have gotten some partial financing to kickstart the project or do what is called the groundbreaking and start the initial processes, but they will use most of the time the money they have gotten from the purchasers, that is you and me, to build those units. So that is essentially how it works. So what happens is you come in and you buy something that is on a plan. So what you're buying is a promise that if you give me this amount of money, I am going to build you a house that looks XYZ and I'll hand it over to you by XYZ date. So most of the time you'll find if you're entering into an agreement at this point, probably your house will be handed over towards the end of the year or next year, depending on the timelines they have set to build. Most of the time it will be maybe a year or 18 months. I've seen some even go to 24, depending on the structure and what is needed to be done for that whole development. So one of the things that is very important when you want to buy an off-plan, of course, the site visit, you need to know where this property is, The other thing you need to also get is, of course, the property details, the developer's details, and like everyone who is involved in that transaction in terms of the developer, the people that are doing the construction. It's also important to identify who those are. The people, the kind of land that you're purchasing, they use, and whether they have gotten the approvals, whether they have done something called change of use. It's important from the initial point of view to understand how far along in the process they have gone. Because sometimes you find they'll do these processes simultaneously. Because doing a change of use is essentially your property has been assigned for a certain purpose. It could be a commercial property or a residential property. So maybe if it was a residential and I want to make it commercial, I have to do a change of use. Or if it was maybe a residential but only allowed to build one unit, I have to get a change of use to allow for multi-dweller, whatever use. So it's important to understand, if at all this property needs change of use, have they started that process? How far along are they in that process? What kind of approvals, terms and conditions, and all these other things have they been given? And always do your due diligence, kama kawaida, search, all those things. But now for an off plan, it's a lot more, because even if you do a search, they have not started building, and what you're buying is not the whole property. You're buying your own apartment or just a unit or something like that. So it's important to understand, one, how are these people going about their development? Is it partially financed? Is it you who is bringing in the money fully? It's important to understand some of those logistical aspects. And then what most people don't really understand with this developments, or what I'd call developments, if they have like an advocate or something, you'll find they have what they call standard agreements or standard leases, meaning, oh, you can't change this, you can't do that. But I would propose, if you are interested in buying an off plan, just consult a legal person to go through the documents and try to negotiate and read through and help you understand what are the terms and conditions for these apartments. Because in some instances, they'll tell you, like they'll write in those agreements, that if they are not able to deliver the unit, you don't get your money back, because they have used your money to build the house. So if the house is not completed for whatever reason, then you're not gonna get your money back. And most people, that's how they end up losing their money, because your agreement said if they default and they don't finish the apartment, ololo yaye tumetumia pesa yako, that's it. So it's important to have those things, identify in your agreement what are the timelines that they want to use to build this apartment. Number two, what are some of the things they need or they will deliver to me at the point of completion, or at the point when I'm finishing the payments? What are these documents that they promise to give me? Personally, I do not recommend someone buying like a completely off plan, like in the sense that it's just at groundbreaking, ndio tu amenunua shamba. I recommend for someone to buy when they are, at least there's a shell or something, like they have made some progress, because that tells you that these guys have already gotten financing to some extent, and so they are not fully dependent or leaning on my own money to come and build this for me, because that one has a lot more higher stakes than these other where the bank is involved, because the bank also does their due diligence before they finance a project, and at times, if it doesn't work out, they'll take it up, give it to another developer to finish it, and then they sell those properties off. Okay, that's very complicated, but let's go back to the basics. Your agreement, there's something called an agreement for sale or agreement for lease, depending on the property. But the agreement for lease is where you have negotiations and leeways, and the offer letter. Most of them will give you an offer letter before you sign the agreement. And when you sign the offer letter is binding. So the minute you're interested in an off plan and they have told you, we'll give you an offer letter, you sign, please run to a legal court. Just run to your lawyer. Just go tell them this is what is happening. Because most people come, you've already signed the offer letter, they're saying it's binding. And then now we are being given the agreement for sale, and it has the terms for the offer letter, and then they're telling you, but you already signed the offer letter with the same terms. Why do you want to change them? And then you have paid money. Because of why? Why have you paid that money without having someone review those documents for you? That's how people lose money, because you are in such a hurry. And let me tell you, those things are going always to be lucrative. Like, they'll always make these promises. They're like, let me tell you, 50% sold, 75%, only 2 slots remaining. So you need to run to a legal consultant. Like, just go to, and by that I mean an advocate. Go to an advocate, have them read for you the fine print of the offer letter and the agreement for sale. Some of the, if at all right now, maybe you're like, I have already gotten myself into this story. There's some important documents that you need to consider at the time. Maybe you've already gotten into the process and you're in that process. I'll mention a few documents that you need to look out for. Just a few. It's not conclusive, but I just want to give you an idea. One is something called certificate of completion, practical completion. That says when it's issued like at the point where the building is being completed. That says the building has been completed. And then another certificate called certificate of occupation. You can have completed a building, but then it's not approved for occupation, in the sense that someone cannot get into that house. So it has to be certified safe for human beings can live in it. And nashuku, most of these what are they called, houses that you have had, or sijui it's sinking or something like that, is because they were not fully approved for occupation. Because you can build a house and then the kanjo is like, no, but people can't live here because of XYZ. So certificate of occupation. The other thing that why you also need to check that certificate is because there's something called a 6 months defective period, meaning that from the time that certificate is issued, you have a 6 month gap where any defects on that apartment or building can be rectified at the developer's cost, not at your cost. Any structural issues or finishing, like anything that they made in that house, you have a 6 months, something called defects liability period, where the developer or the person who sold to you that unit has the liability or has a responsibility to repair for you any damages, especially structural damages, within that you detect within the 6 months. So for some people, you'll find that your certificate of occupation or completion was issued 7 months ago or something like that. So what you do, the reason why you need now an advocate is to come in and negotiate for you so that the defects liability period can start running when you take possession of this new unit. Because maybe sometimes you have come to buy when already the certificate of occupation has been issued and those units have already been in the market for maybe 3 months or so. So you need to get someone to come and, kind of negotiate for you to get your 6 months from the time you either take occupation or the time you have possession. Possession does not necessarily mean you have moved in, but it means that you're finished paying and you have the keys and you can access the house. So it starts running from that day. So another thing that you also need to be careful about is to ensure that you get your original document, the title or the lease or whatever that is. You always need to get that. And then if the property, they had taken out a loan against the property, you also need something called a partial discharge of charge, meaning that your unit is no longer under the hands of the bank that financed them. So there's a structure, there's a way they discharge some and leave some still responsible by the bank. So that now, even if that whatever whole project was to not be completed, your unit, the one that you paid fully for, has already been released by the bank and you can own it. Yeah. So you also need to look out for what else? Which other document? NEMA, of course, the approvals by the National Environment Management Authority. I think it should be that in full. NEMA, the approvals, you need to check out those approvals. The plans, look at how the house looks like on paper and all these other things. Make sure those plans are registered as well. The floor plans, the building plans, all those things, they need to be registered as well. So there's a lot more than just those documents I've mentioned that you need to look out for, that you need to ask for. But it is important to at least have an idea, like no stamp duty, ensure you pay, you get the slips, all those things. There's a lot of nitty-gritty that most people don't look at when you're, buying that apartment. And also you also need to understand your responsibility in terms of paying, because off-plan units have a lot more expenses than buying a unit from a unit that already has an owner. So if I'm buying it from the developer, like if it's the first time it is being bought, it has a lot more expenses, because there's a lot that is being done on it. There's a lot of initial fees. So you as a first buyer are likely to incur a lot more costs than if you were a second buyer. So it's important for you to understand what other costs, because most people think if the house is just 4 million, it's advertised on the newspaper or on TV, they're saying these units are going for 4.5 million. So you think, it's just 4.5 million. You might find that 4.5 million, because it's just the buying price, the closing costs, what we call the completion cost or the closing costs, could be another 500,000 or another million. So it's important for you to understand, especially if you're a first buyer, an off-plan buyer, you will have a lot more costs than the person who will come and buy after you. That's a high likelihood, because you're the one paying for everything. The developer will not want to pay for anything. They will want you to cater for the cost of getting everything, including the consent. So it's important to know that if you're a first-time buyer, it's not just what they have said you're paying. It's not just the 5 million or the 10 million. There's a lot more costs, which could even end up being another extra million or more. Sawa. So it's important to understand those closing costs. Ask for those costs. And then another thing you need to understand, if you're a first-time buyer, you pay fees, legal fees, twice if you have an advocate, because the developers will have you pay for their advocates. That's another cost that you see why the costs are more. So you will find that if I am a developer, I will offload the fees, the legal fees, to you who is the buyer. So the buyer, you will pay my advocate as the developer, and then you will pay your own advocate. So most of the time, I have experienced this so much. Someone comes to me, they want to buy an off-plan unit. I give them the schedule of the things they have to pay from the developer, of course. And then I give them my fee note, and they're like, why am I paying fees twice? It is what she said, what she said. I said what I said. Like, you will pay fees twice most of the time. Not many developers will want to pay fees for themselves, so they will give you will pay something called handling charges. So it could, depending on the law firm that is handling the project, it could be fair or it could just be full fees. So be ready for that. Don't be shocked when you're being charged twice, because you pay for the developer, the advocates for the developer, and you also pay your own advocate. Sawa? Yes. So I think that is essentially it. Most of the in the details I'm able to give right now, but this is just like, it's like an eighth. Yani, it's kidogo information as compared to what you need to know about off plans. And I know there's always those questions of these companies, why do people end up in all this kind of mess? Most of the time, because you did not consult your advocate, or also another thing, because bad things just happen sometimes. But it is better to be protected than to go into a transaction that has a lot of, sometimes you'll even come to us as your advocate, and we'll just tell you, this project is not worth it. Just don't invest in it. Like, sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is just not buy that property. Yeah. But that is just a snippet of some of the things. Of course, if you need our or my legal expertise when buying your off-plan property, you can just DM me or find me anywhere on my socials, and then I'll be able to, guide you further and can have you as my client. Trust you me, I'm very good at my job. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this segment. If there's anything else you would like me to clarify, or any more information you'd want maybe me to talk about on this off-plan bit, I know this is very touchy and it has a lot of things around it, but if you need any more information or you want me to talk about something else about it, please just hit my DM or the comment section, and then we can take that up the next time. But for now, thank you so much, and God bless you. Bye.